Welcome back to Fast Market here on the TD Ameritrade Network. Let's bring in our next guest for our cash tag segment, and that's going to be Landon Swan, co-founder at Likefolio. Welcome back to the show, Landon.
Thank you, Tom. Hey, Kevin.
So, Landon, the stock's just Darden Restaurants just off all-time highs. It seems like people continuing to want to go out to restaurants. They're not going to let any inflation kind of counter what they're doing at this point. I mean, does your data at Likefolio kind of support the movement that we've seen in the stock? Because, it's been up there.
Yeah, it's doing really well. I mean, I think yesterday it hit the all-time high, and it's even up today a little bit total, even though the markets are selling off a little bit. So investors are loving this right now. Like you said, just off all-time highs. And they reported last quarter pretty strong numbers, and they kind of hinted that people are basically seeing eating out as an affordable luxury, right? So this is something like they're just not willing to give it up. It's something that you can afford, and they do have some lower cost restaurants in their portfolio. So one thing that we're seeing, though, is that consumers are sort of trading down from the higher end dining. So some of the companies that Darden owns are going to be affected by that, Capital Grille and now Ruth's Chris, but others are going to be benefiting from that. Their main one, Olive Garden, is almost half their revenue, and that is this sort of the trade down play, right? So that is a little bit cheaper, and it's not the high end dining, but you're still eating out and you're having a good experience. So when we look at sort of all of the different brands that they have, you can see that Olive Garden is the one that's doing the best over the last month. And that's good news for them. If you had to pick one to do well, and if all the others weren't going to do that great, you'd pick Olive Garden because, again, it's their biggest one. So that's good to see. I am a little bit concerned with some of the others. And, we have to start talking about Ruth's Chris inside of there as well. Side note, Eddie V's didn't make this chart. Their sample size is just too small. So we don't have a lot of insight on them. So not a lot of customers going there compared to some of these other brands. But, one of the things that I think is driving Darden is their profit margins. They are the strongest of their peer group by quite a bit, actually. So when you look at Morgan Stanley did a research project recently, they put out some notes. Their profit margins were almost 20%, whereas the next biggest was right at 16%, and some of them were down as low as like 11 or 12%. So they're doing really well on the profit margin side of things. The main concern there, though, is food costs. They are rising very quickly. Chicken's up maybe 37% over the last, since 2020, basically. Pork's up 18%, beef's up 32%, and we just had a report come out saying that we're at the lowest number of cattle in the U.S. in over a decade. And so the beef production in the U.S. is expected to decline about 2 billion pounds in 2024, which of course means prices are going up in beef as well. So that's definitely going to affect Ruth's Chris, Capital Grille, maybe not Olive Garden as much, but the costs are going to be rising. So this is, the profit margin, I think, is the biggest potential problem that we have with the restaurant plays in general right now. I think Olive Garden's probably situated better than most for that. So Darden Restaurants is. But margins are absolutely going to be critical. So long term, we're a little bit skeptical at these prices. I think that, we get up to these price levels, we're starting to say, yeah, maybe this is a bit much. Maybe sell some shares if you have some. That's what I would say. Holding Darden Restaurants going into the earnings, we're neutral, leaning bearish. But overall, they're kind of the winner of the restaurant groups, but we're seeing some pressure coming for all of the restaurants.
Landon, this is always a fascinating conversation. And the data that you were talking about, fine dining margins average between 17 and 23%, casual margins about 11 to 16%. So what happens is in 2014, they sold Red Lobster, right? Because that was kind of out of their comfort lane, right? Because of fish and the volatility of those prices. They buy Ruth's Chris, something they're really good at in terms of Longhorn Steakhouse and Capital Grille. They get that. And so they think they're going to be able to save money on synergies because that's the business that they know and can control. And Ruth's Chris is adding to that fine dining margins, which will help their overall margins. I think, listen, 8 full-service restaurants, about to be 9, with almost 2,000 restaurants around. Everyone's got their little lane that they like, right? My favorite is Capitol Grill and Seasons 52, one that's not the most popular, but it's real popular near my house. But if you look on the main drag near my home, there's just about every single Darden restaurant. And by the way, they just built their own new freestanding Olive Garden right near my house. Now, we don't go to the Olive Garden, but I do like a good Capitol Grill steak every now and then. But I think this company stays in their circle of competence with steaks and the foods that they serve. And like I said, getting rid of Red Lobster isn't something, it's something to be said that you mentioned. This is a really well-run company, and they came through the pandemic a clear winner, Landon.
Absolutely, clear winner. I think they do operate the most efficiently out of all of the casual restaurants. As I mentioned, then you've got the fine dining to bump that up as well. They are executing on all cylinders. They're doing really well. I mean, if I have to own a casual restaurant company, it's probably Darden. At these prices, though, I'm probably taking some off the table. I just think we're getting a little bit high, and I do think with the margins are going to be squeezed by these ever-increasing food prices. So I'm worried about that. The only other negative that I have on this company is the happiness level. It's just not on par with some of its competitors. If you look at Darden restaurants, it's about 70% happiness. When you go across some of these others, Texas Roadhouse, Chili's, Cheesecake, you can see they're all a little bit higher. So now Darden does have a much wider variety. It's got several restaurants, many chains in there. So we're comparing a lot to a few here, but still, on average, they should be up here with the rest of these. So that gives me a little bit of a pause. That's probably the main thing that gives me pause at this company at these all-time highs, is that their customers aren't leaving as happy. And these aren't huge differences. Like the difference between 70 and 77 it's significant, but it's not monumental. So it's not like a giant red flag. It's just a pause. And if you're at all-time highs, a pause for me is take some off the table.
Landon, to that point, Capitol Grill by my house 2 months ago couldn't get a seat at the bar. 2 weeks ago, the bar was empty. So that might be that lag effect where people are trading down. Maybe they're not going to Capitol Grill. But when you look at this, from maybe purchase intentions type mentions that you guys talk about quite a bit, is that going out to eat still elevated at this point, or is this going to be a system-wide type of maybe downturn, or do you see at least leveling off?
Leveling off. So it was a nice run up. I think that we've seen a little bit leveling off, and I'd like to see it run up in the summer. I think it should run up in the summer as the weather gets nicer across the country. It's just, people like to go out to eat more, but we're not seeing a huge run up like we would like to see. It's more of leveling off right now. So again, there's another sort of small yellow flag that we'd be waving on restaurants in general, plus the margin stuff that I talked about earlier. So again, all-time highs. I'm taking some off the table, especially going into earnings here.
All right, great stuff, great data as always, Landon. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
All right.